We are live for what that's worth. Welcome everyone to my medieval sewing party. I am the Contessa, otherwise known as the Creative Contessa, and welcome to Starbucks here in South Korea. We're in Daegu and we're at my favorite Starbucks, and I think you can see why with a beautiful backdrop like this. Why wouldn't I want to come here for a sewing party? So the format, as always, is I will sew and share my learnings about medieval material culture and my thoughts about a variety of philosophical topics relevant to history or to the modern life. And if you have questions, you pop them in the chat. If you're watching this as a recording, then pop them in the comments afterwards, and I will be happy to answer your questions then. So, what is everyone working on today? And also, can you hear me? If you are out there in the live stream, can you hear me? I feel like a damn Verizon commercial sometimes. I am at the point of finishing up. Oh, there is my condottiero. You can hear me. How's the background noise? I found the gain setting on the receiver, so I'm hoping that I managed to turn down the ambient noise that's happening all around me. So here's hoping that's true. So I'm going to be continuing to work on and finishing, actually pretty quickly, the second sleeve for my new so-called Burgundian gown. That's the kind of gown that I should be wearing over top of this kirtle. You are clear, but I can still hear them. Is it overpowering? I think I might be able to turn the gain down some more. Let me see what I can do here. Okay, I have turned the gain down yet again. So let me know, did that turn down the ambient noise as well? Yeah, just let me know. I'm trying to eliminate the ambient noise as much as possible. There's got to be some benefit to having, one of these expensive mics. Maybe moving it closer to where the sound emits from my body might help. I don't know. We'll find out. Not overpowering, it did not. Oh well, I tried. Right, so is everyone working on today? I have actually been listening today to a very fascinating documentary. One of my favorite fellow YouTubers did a fantastic hour and 10-minute documentary on tea, the history of tea, and tea culture in various places in the world. And I've seen this documentary. I thought I had seen this documentary before, but apparently it didn't. But one of the interesting, by the way, learnings in this documentary is why China and Japan and Korea no longer use fish sauce as a flavoring condiment the way they have in South Asia, the way they still do in South Asia. Well, it has to do with Buddhism, because up until the rise of Buddhism in Asia, everyone, like ancient Rome, everyone in Asia was apparently using fermented fish sauce to flavor their food. Well, Buddhism comes along and encourages vegetarianism on a massive scale. And so basically that is what led to the rise of the creation of tofu. That is also what led to the rise of fermented soy. So like fermented soybean paste or fermented soy sauce, right? Doenjang or tobujang or all of those miso, right? All of those were invented basically because they couldn't use fish sauce anymore, because fish sauce is a fermented animal product, and Buddhism demands plant-based products. Not only is that why so much of Asia now uses fermented soy instead of fermented fish guts, but that's also why tea got its start as the main beverage of choice, because before that, rice liquor was apparently the beverage of choice for social settings. But unfortunately, apparently, the Buddhist leaders recognized that alcohol leads to non-peaceful behavior, and so they discouraged their adherents from consuming rice liquor. In comes tea, the perfect thing to encourage social behavior that is of a more peaceful type. So those are some very interesting learnings from this documentary. I'll see if I can share that in my community post, because I definitely believe in promoting my fellow creators who are putting out good work, and this channel is like heads and shoulders above mine. It's so far ahead of mine in production values and earnings. But you may have seen their stuff before. They do a lot of food related documentaries, like the history of various food stuff related documentaries, while traveling around around the places where they're discussing. Basically, they're doing what I wish I could do on my travel channel, but my travel channel doesn't seem to let me do. Yeah. Anyway, let me see. Hi, Contessa, are you having matcha? I am not having matcha today. I'm having Jeju Nokta, so green tea from Jeju. And it is, let me tell you, the Starbucks here in Daegu serves an absolutely top quality product. So check out these amazing pyramid tea bags, 2 giant whole leaf pyramid tea bags for 1 cup of tea. It's like, and look at the beautiful green. I mean, seriously. Yeah, quality tea for certain. If I turn my volume down from, if I turn my volume down from 100%, the background noise is less. That's great. Good question. What would have been some common drinks in medieval Europe before the obvious introduction of tea by the Portuguese much later on? Like if you had company over, what sort of beverage would you make? Great question. Okay, there's several beverages that would have been considered social drink and also essential drink. So the first and the most common in this era is probably small beer or small ale or small whatever the local alcohol of choice is. And this is sort of like the second brewing. It's a version of beer or ale, etc., that is so light in alcohol it's almost like more like kombucha, right? That was the main beverage for a large portion of society across most of the Middle Ages. Diluted wine would have been something that the upper class would have consumed. Whereas beer and ale are much more democratic beverages, shall we say. Wine is a more expensive beverage, and because basically most women with any decently, even minorly sized household brewed. Brewing, that's right, brewing was the profession of women in the Middle Ages mostly. And it was something, ale and beer and cider, whatever it is you're talking about that's brewed, it was basically something that they did as a side business. So an ale wife is literally a woman who made and sold beer or sold ale. So you have what's called small ale or small beer, which is what the majority of people would have consumed. And I haven't actually had it myself because I don't like ale or beer, but I've been told by people who've had it that it's basically like a version of kombucha and it gives you a buzz. It's more like an energy drink rather than a downer. Other things in the noble households, in the well-to-do households, diluted wine. They almost never drank undiluted wine. It was always cut at least by half. And people who are famed for their temperance would have done it, on a sort of by 3/4. So, for example, Charles the Good of Burgundy was famous, and there's a chronicler from Portugal who notes that he cut his wine to 1/4 wine, 3/4 water. There are also actually tisanes, so herbal, as we might say, herbal teas that are described in the Ménagier de Paris, the medieval home companion written in 1391, actually provides recipes for several tisanes that you can make and just keep basically like on the counter, and then when you have guests, you serve it to them. So they actually prescribe, pre-steeping these herbal teas, these tisanes, and having them on hand. And they actually have, herbs, like green herbs that you would expect. So obviously, as you point out, tea leaves weren't in medieval Europe, but they had plenty of herbs. And so herbs like rosemary and sage, sometimes a little bit of honey maybe is encouraged to be put into it. Some herbs that you can't even get anymore, you'd have to grow them yourself. So, herbal teas are a thing, small ales and small beers are a thing, diluted wine is a thing. Let's see, I'm trying to think of other beverages that I've seen that are not medicinal but that are social. Mead, a little bit. I haven't really seen medieval references to the consumption of mead in the course of exploring the texts that I have explored, which doesn't mean it wasn't done. I just haven't encountered it personally. Yeah. Let me see. Louvre Mill, welcome. I am sewing a sleeve for a medieval gown, the gown that's going to go over top of this dress, actually, while talking about medieval material culture. So if you have questions about medieval material culture, please do pop them in the live chat. Let me see. Think Fact asks, would iced drinks have been common? No. Yes, there were places that had ice, but the people who had were able to purchase ice were the very, very wealthy, and you had to be within a reasonable distance of a mountain with a glacier or a perma snow. Yeah, they did absolutely. There was a trade in snow in barrels, but it was expensive. It was a luxury item. So iced drinks were not common, and in fact, I haven't really found would not have been common. And offhand, I can't think of a primary source reference to an iced beverage. Can't think of any offhand. As far as I understand it, the ice that was harvested was used for transporting goods that needed to be kept cold, like fish, for instance. Although wet straw was also used to transport fish. But no, ice drinks do not seem to have been common. I can't think of a single reference of an ice drink from any of the texts that I've read about medieval material culture and dining habits. So, no, I don't think so. Let me see. Port and cognac brandy. Port. So port, of course, comes from Oporto in Spain. It's a fortified wine. I'm actually not certain when they started fortifying port wine, Oporto, in Portugal. Jerez sherry is also a fortified wine. Brandy is a brandwein, and I think what we understand brandy is it's a distilled beverage, right? So distillation doesn't become very common in Europe until like the tail end of the 15th century. And even then, they don't really start consuming distilled beverages as a beverage for a while thereafter because distillation is viewed as something you do for alchemy, but not as something you do for consumption. So I'm actually not so certain about brandy. I haven't seen any medieval references for brandy. I know that Portuguese wine it was a known thing. I don't know if it was fortified, which is what makes port wine, right? Let me see. Twitchy, hello, welcome. Lovely to see you. Are you freshly awake or are you still awake? Liquid bread, my brother calls it. He's made a little bit for LARPs. Yep, absolutely. Android, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah. Yeah, and cognac. Again, I have not seen any references to cognac in any primary sources, and I'm less familiar with the detailed history of each of the alcohols. But in just in reading medieval manuals of etiquette and dining and cookbooks and chronicles, I haven't seen it referenced directly, which doesn't necessarily mean anything. Yeah. So yep. But Ryan, the brandy that was invented by the Arabs wasn't meant for drinking. It's part of the alchemy thing, right? It's brandwein. It's distilled. Like distillation has been around in general since the first millennium, if not longer. But that doesn't mean it was in Western Europe. See, that's the point. Yep. Twitchy half awake. Well, thank you for sharing your semi-somnolent state with us. Yeah. So I'm just actually finishing up the whip stitching down the seam allowances of my 15th century Burgundian sleeves. Don't Cup, lovely to see you again. Welcome back. Nothing quite like history to get me motivated to wake up. But so again, Twitchy, are you still awake, as in halfway to sleep, or waking up? Greeting, Odie. Welcome from California. Are you awake still or awake now? Just awake. Happy New Year. Great prosperity and joy to you all. Yeah, so I am in a Starbucks in South Korea. Isn't this a gorgeous Starbucks? It has been built to be it's basically a reconstruction of a historical style building, right? Using timber frame construction, all handmade, all hand assembled, right? Yeah, it's one of my favorite places in Korea, and it's my favorite Starbucks in the world. And in fact, they have this I'm sorry, I ate it already. I was hungrier than I thought I was. They have this new low sugar red bean walnut bun, which is the traditional Korean thing, but they have a low sugar version of it, which that's been my complaint about the red bean buns here, is they are super sweet, holy shit sweet. This one was not. It was actually low sugar and not terribly sweet. It was so delicious. So yeah, if you're here in Korea and you're at a Starbucks, get their Jeju green tea, Jeju Nokta, and I wasn't trying to, I'm not trying to shill for them because I'm not sponsored by them at all, but their Jeju green tea is amazing, and these low sugar walnut red bean buns are super delicious. Yep. What era are your clothes from? Proper Cadence. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to my live stream. I am wearing 15th century Franco-Burgundian Flemish ensemble / English. French. This kerchief, you start seeing this in about the 1450s, and then it continues to be worn into probably the 1550s I've seen. So yes, I am in my casual, very casual. I call this my noblewoman Lululemon. This is my noblewoman Lululemon ensemble. I shouldn't technically be out and about dressed just like this as a noblewoman, but I had a lot of long distances to walk today in a city with streets that are made of concrete, and I didn't feel like dragging a gown with a train all over the place over the concrete. So yeah, you get medieval Lululemon. I did. Question is, did I make it? I did. Everything you see me wearing, I made myself. I patterned myself. I don't use commercial patterns, not because I don't believe in them, but because I've seen one for the styles I actually like to recreate. So yeah, these are all my own creations based on my own patterns, all hand sewn, because I prefer, as you can see I'm sewing now, I just prefer hand sewing because of the granularity, because of the detail, the control that I can have, the fine motor skills that I can really apply to achieve really beautiful, perfect little stitches. And also I can control the fabric so much better and get a much neater outcome than with a machine. I mean, I've started on machine, but now I only use machine when I am in a rush, and then I use it basically only for the parts you can't see. But all the things you see me wearing today are all hand sewn. Yeah. Let me see. Odie says, I wish I could only dream of traveling to Korea. I'm still awake. I should be sleeping. Have you seen the movie The King with Timothy Chalamet about King Henry V? Okay, so The King. I can't watch The King. I saw the stills from The King, and the clothing made me so despair so deeply that I can't get past it. So the thing is that The King is in an era when everyone was wearing bright colors. And the stills that I saw from The King looked like gray and blue and black and brown. And that is not the color. Nobility, especially the king, Henry, had beautiful robes in bright, amazing colors covered in gold embroidery. And the clothes are just so inaccurate that I couldn't watch it. Sorry. I just published a short, well, I guess it's been a month ago now. I published my most viral video ever is a short in which I just bemoan the state of medieval material culture in movies, in Hollywood productions. And The King, unfortunately, falls right in that category. It just really does. Then the problem is, for me, and I don't, it's just, I can't watch it. If the clothing is terrible, it's so distracting that I can't actually focus on the story. I can't see past it. I can't look past it. Because in this era, in the Middle Ages, the pre-modern era, basically, clothing goes hand in hand with the history and the identity. The way in which people dressed was a key part of that history. The cut, the silhouettes, the fabrics they were made of, the way they were adorned, the jewelry they wore, that was all a deeply seated part of the history, of the economic history, of the social history, of the legal history, right? So when the clothing is very badly wrong, to me it's like you missed the point of the history. So I can't watch it. I can't. The stills made me not want to watch it. Someone would have to pay me to watch it, honestly. I am in Korea. I'm in Daegu, South Korea. This is traditional Korean architecture, not traditional Japanese architecture. Yeah. Are there any things about Korea during the medieval era that had some interesting similarities to Europe that you've learned since being in Korea? Yeah, okay, yes, there are. So the 15th century in Europe is a time of massive innovation, right? There's innovation in art, innovation in the sciences, innovation in technology, and this exact same thing happens in 15th century Korea. Weirdly, Korea has this great king called Sejong the Great, and he's like, I keep saying, "Where's my Sejong? We need our Sejong because we really need a Sejong super badly." Sejong was a philosopher. He was a scientist. He was an engineer. He was a poet. He was a linguist. He was Leonardo da Vinci basically, and he had an entire innovation department in the palace where he helped innovate stuff. Amazing inventions, well ahead of their time. He was a progressive ruler. And so, the same time that's happening here in Korea, that, it's going on also in 15th century Europe. So there are some similarities there, but also, of course, clothing in medieval Europe and in this what would be the Middle Ages in Europe, but is not the Middle Ages in Korea. In that same era, that's the idea of clothing being symbolic of your rank, symbolic of your status, colors having meaning, that's all there as well. Layers, that you should dress in layers, that the layers against your skin are the ones that are undyed and get washed. Same idea in Korea. But otherwise, the social situation is so different that there's just not many points of comparison. It's such a different kind of history. Because of Buddhism, because of Confucianism, because of Neo-Confucianism. It's just such a different kind of history. It's remarkable sometimes. Let me see. Almost like a Vermeer painting, The Milk Girl. Agreed. I adore hand sewing. Nothing gives me more pleasure than whip stitching a lining in a place, right? I love the whip stitch for the win. Whip stitchers unite. My favorite stitch is the whip stitch, hands down. Are you in historical academia, or is this purely a personal interest? Well, proper cadence. I mean, I have a university education, and after I graduated, I just kept on studying and learning. I am, however, seriously considering. I'm probably going to do it. I'm going to be getting my PhD in fashion history. So I'm just at the point of choosing an institution, finding a university that has a mostly online program, and then I'm just going to do it. I'm colleagues with fashion historians who are PhD'd and who respect me greatly, and they literally look at me and say, "You already know everything you need to know. Just get the PhD, man. Just go and get the piece of paper." So yeah, I'm going to be doing that. But this has been what does personal interest versus professional mean, right? Like I probably spend more time studying than most university professors. All right, seriously. I'm constantly reading chronicles and archives and expense accounts and inventories and criminal records and the latest and greatest in research that's being published. So yeah, I just never stopped learning after I graduated, and so I've decided it's silly. I'm just gonna go back and get my PhD in fashion history, because as I'm finding out here in Korea, having a PhD will get me entrée into all of these collections of historical Korean garments, because many of these museums won't let you look at their historical Korean garments unless you have a PhD. How sucky is that? Well, I'm just gonna get past it by getting my PhD. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, Plato was clearly onto something with philosopher kings. Yeah, 100%. Where is our philosopher king? Right? And hypothetically, all the kings of Joseon were technically philosopher kings because they were scholars. They literally spent all day, every day studying and learning the ancient Chinese texts about being a moral ruler, etc., etc. Like that's what they did all day, every day. They only got like 4 to 6 hours of sleep a night, the kings of Joseon. But unfortunately, the nobility were the ones who actually had the power, and they definitely didn't want philosopher kings interfering with its social order, for instance. Nobles in Korea use silk. Yes, silk. The majority. So. The nobility had a lot of overlayers in what would be the Middle Ages in Europe, but is not the Middle Ages in Korea, I would like to emphasize. There's no Middle Ages in Korea, right? There is no between period between this great era and that great era. There's just dynasties. Same thing in China, right? They're just dynasties. So, in what would be the Middle Ages in Europe, so let's say from the first millennium, basically from the first millennium until the early 20th century, the aristocrats wore silk on the top layers. The underlayers, though, were generally either hemp or cotton, not linen. They didn't have linen here at all. Hemp or cotton, and there was a luxury summer fabric called rami that they would wear it's nettle cloth basically, that they would wear on top over as an overlayer. So yeah, the silk was definitely a primary fabric, and Korea had, for a long time, until Neo-Confucianism ruined everything, Korea had a very sophisticated silk production industry. They didn't import all of their silks. A lot of their silks they wove here in the country. It was really only once when Neo-Confucianism came in with all of its tenets about pseudo-modesty that the king actually started passing laws against weaving elaborate fabrics. And so Neo-Confucianism was so bad for Korea. So they actually lost the technology. They lost the skill to weave complex fabrics. How sad is that? Let me see, how fast did fashion progress during medieval times? Every century or faster. Oh my God. Yeah, as Twitchy says, it depends on when and where. The Middle Ages, I'm gonna emphasize, the European Middle Ages is not a monolith. That's 1,000 years across an entire continent. And so it's just not the same depending on when and where you are exactly. I would say that as the decades wear on, fashions certainly start changing much more quickly. So, fashions, the silhouette of clothing doesn't seem to change very drastically in the first millennium. Every 50 years or so, you might see some new ideas coming along. But then once you hit the 12th century, suddenly things start changing more and more rapidly. And then by the time you get to the 13th, 14th century, the pace is even more accelerated. And in the 15th century, I could identify a decade for you based on the clothing you showed me, easily. For every single country in Europe, I could identify the decade based on the clothing you showed me. So that's how quickly things really start changing. But here's the thing you have to realize is that just because the fashion changes, that doesn't mean that people's clothes actually change, right? What the fashionistas are wearing is not necessarily representative of what everyone else is wearing. So we do know that, especially at the lower levels of society, fashion changes much less quickly, to the point where even in early 16th century England, you will see farmers wearing clothes that would look okay also in early 15th century England. So yeah, it depends on what your social status is, and keep in mind that just because the latest in court fashion changes, that doesn't mean that changes what people are actually wearing on a daily. And even not what the aristocrats are wearing. They might have a lady might have a gown in the latest cut, but she also has an entire wardrobe of other gowns that she's going to keep wearing until they either wear out and can't be repaired anymore, and then they'll be turned into something else, or she'll give them to a servant, or she'll donate them to the poor. So, it's even though the innovations of fashion might change, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone changes what they're wearing. Now people do, because we have fast fashion, unfortunately, the bane of civilization. But they didn't have fast fashion back then at all. Let me see. Yeah, fabric was super costly, just what Twitchy says. Let me see. What would be your favorite myth to dispel about medieval fashion? That poor people didn't wear colors. Yeah, I've got so many. That people wore leather. No. Some people very rarely did people have leather garments. You wore leather shoes. You had, leather was used, but it wasn't used to make suits of clothing the way you see in movies. That people only wore brown. No, everyone wore colors. Everyone wore colors, because even the poorest of the poor were receiving clothes that were donated by the wealthy and that were dyed bright colors. We know because we have the donation records. And there are secondhand markets where the poor people can go and buy the cast-offs of their better, which are dyed because people like wearing color. And that even poor people will walk around in raggedy clothes. No, they repaired them. They did everything they could, even at the bottom rungs of society. They did everything they could not to look like a ragamuffin, literally a ragamuffin. Right? We have garments that are clearly come from the lower strata, extant garments that come clearly from the lower strata of society that have been patched carefully patched, multiple patches, everywhere patched. You had to be on the really bottom of the bottom to be wearing clothes that are just filled with holes, right, and not actually repair them. So yeah, I think that would be it. I would definitely want to fight the idea that everyone wore leather and that men wore trousers for most of the Middle Ages, leather trousers especially, and that the regular commoners didn't wear colors. Yeah. Let me see. We need to thank people for preservation beyond religious and political agenda. Yeah, 100%. So here's the thing about pants, trousers, right? They come, again, fashion history is not a straight line, right? Just because the earliest instance of people wearing pants is from way earlier than that. But that doesn't mean that people kept wearing them, right? For most of the Middle Ages that are depicted in Hollywood movies anyway, men are not wearing trousers. Sorry, they're wearing hosen. They're wearing hosen with feet, and their hosen are generally not joined until the 15th century. And those hosen fit their legs really nicely, and those hosen attach to their breeches, their braids, their boxer shorts, basically, right? So yes, there are eras throughout the world when men and women have worn trousers, but not consistently. It comes and goes, right? And so most of the Middle Ages that are depicted in Hollywood movies are the goes part of trousers, not the comes part of trousers, right? They're the part where men aren't wearing trousers anymore. One thing you will note historically is that nomadic peoples tend to wear trousers, men and women, for obvious reasons, because they're riding horses, all of them, men and women. So yeah, the trousers thing, for most of the periods being depicted in Hollywood movies, men are not wearing trousers, sorry, and they're definitely not wearing leather trousers. Yeah. Let me see. I'm used to, oh goodness, I think I've gotten way behind. Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you, Chucky, appreciate that. Let me see. Favorite fashion myth, that the Victorian era invented the princess seam or the shape seam. Nah, that was the medieval tailors. Yeah, there are so many. Yeah, yeah. You can actually see the so-called the princess seam in several portraits in the 15th century. At any rate, let me see. I am using AI to find barricades of Emperor Charles V in my local area that previously were unknown. Oh, barricade. Vendetta. ¿Estás en España? Carlos V, porque dices Carlos V, por eso creo que tal vez estás en España. When you say barricades, what do you mean? Are you talking about gates, like gates that he built, or other things? Let me see. So what colors were common pairings? I remember hearing, gotta find my thread. I remember hearing that it matched more to nature than what we think of as common pairings now, and that gender colors weren't a thing. Gender colors were definitely not a thing. Often men and women in a household would have clothes made out of exactly the same cloth, as in they would send the same bolt of fabric to the tailor and order clothes for the whole household out of that same bolt of fabric. So yeah, fabrics are not gendered, patterns are not gendered, colors are not gendered. There are no common color pairings. They didn't think about colors that way. And what colors were in fashion changed based on what was fashionable in the court, what the reigning prince or princess was wearing. So, black becomes very fashionable in the 15th century because starting with Philip the Good, the Duke of Burgundy, the most powerful prince at the time, he loves black, and so he starts wearing black. So all of his courtiers start wearing black. So the ladies in the court also start wearing black, right? But that's so there are really no common color pairings. I couldn't point to anything. I could say that depending on the era, these colors were popular because they were expensive. For a long time, crimson is the queen of colors, right? The really deep red that comes from kermes. And then black becomes the queen of colors. And that black stays the queen of colors for a long time. Dark colors come really into fashion. Dark, rich colors, saturated colors, not bright. The opposite of bright is dark but saturated like this, right? They come into fashion in about the mid-15th century in Western Europe. And they stay in fashion for a while, like until the 17th century. So I can't think of any common color pairings offhand. When you read the expense accounts and inventories, you see that they just don't have the same sense of color matching that we do at all. In fact, some of the color combinations that you read about would be alarming by today's standards, like purple and orange, for instance. Let me see. Nolan Maxwell, welcome back. Thank you for joining. Okay, how long do you believe an individual garment could last in the medieval era with constant repair and patching? Could you realistically use a jacket of grandparents' surviving generations? Yes, you could. Yes, you absolutely could. And we actually have solid evidence of this. So garments could last. So fabrics were generally woven to be much higher quality in the Middle Ages than they are now. More tightly woven, spun with actually better quality thread than machines can produce now often, right? Surprisingly. So they lasted a very long time. For instance, in Greenland, there was a settlement. Many of you may not be aware. There was a settlement in Greenland, a Norse settlement, and it lasted from the first millennium. From the 10th century until the 15th centuries when it died out. It got too cold. We're pretty certain that it just got too cold because of the little ice age. So they've excavated the graveyards there, and they found garments where the person who died definitely died in the 15th century, but they were wearing garments that dated to the 13th or 14th century. The fabric dated, like the carbon dating of the fabric dated them that far back. So we know, for instance, that in Greenland, at least, they were definitely wearing fabric for decades, if not hundreds of years, before literally being buried in it. Now, granted, what's going to happen is after a while, you won't be able to patch and repair the garment because the fabric will start wearing out in very key spots and it just won't be possible to patch it anymore. And then what would happen at that point is that the garment would be cut down into a smaller garment for a smaller person or a smaller kind of garment for the same person. And then when that could no longer be patched or repaired, or it might be handed down to a lower ranking servant or donated to the poor. And then once it just could no longer really work on a body, then it could be cut up and made into pouches for a variety of purposes, seal pouches, relic pouches. It could be used to make clothing, votive clothing, so clothes for statues, for religious statues. And then if it's linen, it can get turned into rag paper. If it's wool or silk and you have scraps of it, it could be used to stuff mattresses. The Lorenzo de' Medici, Il Magnifico, when he died in 1492, his inventory, the inventory taken at the time of his death, which literally details every single thing in his massive palazzo at the time of his death in 1494. And he had multiple mattresses that were stuffed with wool and linen. And we're the way it's phrased, it sounds like wool and linen scraps, offcuts, not like wool cotton, like wool fuzzy wool. What's the word? Like wool roving, not wool roving, not wool or linen roving, like wool or linen scraps. And we also know that they would use to insulate homes, so they actually put it in the ceilings and the walls. And we know that because, for one, the biggest one, of course, Schloss Lengberg, Burglenberg in Austria, they went to excavate it, renovate it in the early aughts. They open up the walls and the ceilings and they find all these hundreds upon hundreds of textiles in them. Some of them quite large pieces of garments. And that just completely changed our view on 15th century tailoring. So yeah, there was a complete life cycle to fabric that we've completely lost now. But we've lost it now in part because we no longer use natural fibers. Unfortunately, most people only wear petrochemicals or other synthetics that are terrible for the environment and terrible for our bodies. Well, let me see. I don't know how AI would help with that when AI can't answer a simple question accurately. Yeah, I don't. I wonder myself, Villa Vendetta. Glad I stumbled on this. It's such a joy to see someone so knowledgeable and passionate. Well, thank you, Proper Cadence. Welcome to my community. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Flemish. Oh, tiny fortress made out of wood and dirt. Oh, that kind. Okay, I see what you're saying, Vendetta. Got it. Yeah, Charles V was. Yeah, okay. Now I know why you're looking for Charles V. Yeah, okay, I get it. I know why. The Protestant movement also pushed black as a color of simplicity, which is just quiet luxury if I ever heard it. Yeah, twitchy. Yeah, the Protestant, yeah. But the Spanish were also wearing black like it was no one's business. So, the Protestants can pretend it's simplicity, but meanwhile the Spanish who are Catholic are also wearing black out the wazoo because it isn't simplicity. Wasn't purple for royalty only. Vendetta, that is I just realized we have two Vendettas. Oh my God, we've got Vendetta Kia and Villa Vendetta. Oh my gosh, okay. Wow, sorry, I just realized those are two completely different handles. Okay, my two Vendettas. Wasn't purple meant for royalty only? No. The so-called purple that people think of as falling under that prohibition is Tyrian purple, which is a purple made from murex and a couple of other specific sea snails. That purple was eventually reserved in the Roman Empire. It was eventually reserved for the imperial family only. And that continued, I think that continued into the Eastern Roman Empire when, Constantinople became the new Rome. But I'm not as familiar with the history of the Eastern Roman Empire as I am with Western Europe. But no, in Ireland, in first millennium Ireland, under the first millennium Brehon laws, purple was also reserved for the High Kings and the High Kings family only. But that's not Europe-wide. And there are many ways to achieve purple. Not all of them are murex. And we know that in ancient Rome, there was a luxury fake industry for purple, for murex purple, for Tyrian purple, because this team of archaeologists just published this fantastic survey of about 180 purple textiles, extant textiles from the 1st and 2nd century AD. And they were purple. And what they found is that all but like 6 of them were fake purple, were not Tyrian purple, right? That they were purple made of madder and woad and not made of murex at all. And so then they started combining that with some of the written records about this purple and the sale of fabric in this purple. So it seems like there's now a fake luxury industry. There was a fake luxury industry in ancient Rome as well. How fun is that? So no, purple for most of places and most times in the 1,000 years that is the Middle Ages in Europe was not a restricted color. No, they don't really start. You don't start seeing restrictions like that outside of Ireland, which is interesting that in the first millennium they have those Brehon laws that govern who gets to wear what kind of color. But those change over time as well in Ireland. For the most part, though, in the rest of Europe, you don't really start seeing what are called sumptuary laws, these luxury laws governing luxury, until the end of the 13th century, when the middle class is starting to rise up and get richer than their noble betters, and therefore starting to be able to afford more than their noble betters. And so then they start regulating who can wear what luxury good. But colors are interestingly not one of the things they regulate. They don't have to, for the most part. What they do regulate, though, is like the kinds of fabrics you can wear, not the color of it, but the kind. So high-low silk velvet or high-low velvet, for instance, well, that can only be worn by people who are worth 200 marks a year and higher, for instance. So the laws regulate kinds of fabrics and kinds of materials, but not so much the colors in Western Europe. Yeah. Okay, let me see. Oh, goodness. Hello, Amish woman. If you think that's Amish clothing, yeah. Let me see. They're starting to use old denim to insulate homes now. It's interesting. Oh, fantastic. What a brilliant idea. Especially if the denim is actually made of cotton versus, all the other garbage out of which you could hypothetically weave denim. Oh, Jakar, welcome from Queens, New York. Well, welcome to Daegu, South Korea. Thank you for joining us. Contessa, what do locals wear what do the locals where you live make of your period dress? They love it, and they don't think it's medieval clothing. They just think I'm wearing something cool. Yeah, locals, the Koreans love it when I wear my medieval and Renaissance clothing out and about. They like the colors, they like the shapes. I get all kinds of compliments from men and women of all ages. The little girls and actually the little boys, the children love it. They're like, "Oh, princess!" I can hear them saying in Korean, "Oh, a princess!" No, super popular. Everyone loves it here. And some people wonder. They of course the general assumption is that it's actually traditional dress, not historical, but traditional. Like, oh, is that traditional French dress? And I'm like, well, it's historical French dress, but not traditional. Yeah. Hey, everyone, don't forget to double tap your screen and subscribe if you haven't. 10 out of 10 would have accused, let me see. Hello, I'm someone who's very interested in the history of textiles. I wasn't aware of your channel, definitely going to subscribe. Nicole, welcome. I am obsessed with the history of textiles, so you are in the right place, my friend, 100%. And in fact, one of my current projects, research projects, hands-on research projects, is into historical Korean garments, specifically focusing right now on 16th and 17th century. And I've actually been to museums here recently, and I'm going to be going to more and have handled and touched firsthand 16th and 17th century Korean clothing. Oh my God, just amazing, amazing. The learnings I've already had just from the few pieces I've actually gotten to examine. Let me see. If time travel was possible, which era would you first visit and explore? Okay, it's a great question. But I'm going to say that I would only time travel if I could go do so in a level 4 hazmat suit. With some kind of impervious enchantment to make me not die. The past is dangerous. It's very dangerous. And especially for a woman like me, it's dangerous. But, if I could pick a time offhand, I would actually want to travel. Offhand, the first thing I'd want to go back to the court of Queen Sondok in the Shilla dynasty here in Korea. For one, the cities were so stunningly beautiful and advanced, and women had equal rights with men. And I'd like to see her court was amazing and erudite, and all of the ceremony and all of the pomp and circumstance. I would dearly love to see that up close and personal. I would like to see how the people lived their daily lives. Yeah, I would actually probably travel to a time on which we have less information so that I could get a better idea than on a time I actually am already really familiar with. Is that maybe not the answer you were expecting? Now that I think about it, that's actually what I would do. I'd pick a time and place for which we have less information about the material culture so that I could fill in those gaps more readily. I definitely would be interested in seeing 15th century Florence firsthand. Again, I would want some kind of guarantee of safe passage. I would love to go back to Al-Andalus, in the golden era of Al-Andalus. So like the 10th century, maybe 9th or 10th century in Al-Andalus, and Andalus in what's now Spain but was not then. Yeah, that would be great too. I'd actually probably be pretty safe there, now that I think about it. That might be a place where I don't need an impervious spell to be safe. Let me see. Let me see. Are there any technologies or techniques from the medieval era that have been completely lost to us and we still don't know how they did it? Greek fire. Greek fire is still a mystery. We don't actually know the exact recipe for Greek fire. It was lost. I think it was lost when I think it was possibly lost when those asshole crusaders sacked Constantinople in 1204, violating their vow to protect Christians from the Saracens by sacking, an entire Christian city, the Christian city, so the Christian capital, as it were. Yeah, I think that's probably when we lost the technology for Greek fire, I seem to recall. Yeah, Greek fire is a technology that is lost, and we still don't know how it was done. And we've only figured out, we think we know how Tyrian purple was made, because a few very dedicated individuals have experimented with it and have figured out a way to recreate Tyrian purple, that royal purple, that imperial purple dye you all were talking about. But we don't know, because again, that technology was lost in 1204 when those asshole Franks sacked Constantinople and brought Tyrian purple production to an end forever. Thank you, asshole crusaders. You all suck. Hashtag crusades suck. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Crusades actually did a lot of good for Europe. They didn't do so much good for that part of the world, though. They did a lot of good for Europe, though. Let me see. Yeah, so Twitchy Witch brings up the point. One of the other techniques we've lost, or maybe not lost, but we just don't do anymore. I think we could figure out how to do it. We just don't want to because it's too expensive. The really super, 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 super fine high thread count fabrics, like linen that is so sheer that you can see through it, that it's almost invisible. Yeah, would love that again. Yeah, we love Korea. We love being here. We love learning all the things. Of the last 11 years, I've probably spent 8 of them here, in and out, either living here or visiting here, touring the sites. If you all are interested in travel and seeing what Korea is like from my perspective, I have a travel channel. By the way, Travels with the Creative Contessa. I have tons of travel vlogs, short videos, long videos, recordings of live streams, going all over Asia, but especially lots of Korea content. I even have I have a tour of Cheongdeokgung Palace, one of the oldest medieval one of the few surviving medieval palaces here in Korea. So if you're interested in, Korea travel stuff, check out Travels with the Creative Contessa. Let me see. I thought you were going to say you would only travel back in time if you were a man. Too real. Yeah, I don't know about that. I still kind of, all in all, I still prefer to be a woman. Contessa, would you kindly show us the garment you're currently working on, please? Yes, of course. Hold on a minute. Let me just seat my needle. This is a sleeve for my new so-called Burgundian gown. It's the kind of dress that should go over top of this one. All right, so this is the sleeve. And I'll put it on here in a moment, but I'll just show you what I've been doing. I ironed open the seam allowance, and I've been whip stitching it down so that it will lay nice and flat, as you see, with whip stitches. And this is basically what it will look like. See? Isn't that swanky? Look at the swanky bell sleeve cuff. Isn't that nice? And then of course I can fold it back if I want. Right, for sexy cuff look or sexy flirty finger look. Right, of course, obviously there's seam allowance here. It's not going to come up this far once it's all finished and everything. But yeah, you can see how nicely it fits over top of my kirtle. See, look at that, nice, fits nice, look around fits my muscular shoulder really nicely. It's got a nice fit to the arm, and see, sexy fitting all along the arm. So it's got that nice, the skinny arm look, as they say. It's got a nice skinny arm look going on, right? So yeah, that's the sleeve. Do Koreans or Asians have different kinds of stitches than Europe in the past? Not that I can tell. So now that I have actually looked at like five, I'm up to five, like I'm up to looking at five Korean, 16th century Korean garments, like here looking at them, and I've looked at a whole bunch with like a foot of distance between my face and the glass. And I've not seen a single stitch that is unique. So no, I've seen all the same stitches: blind stitch, whip stitch, stab stitch, running back stitch, back stitch. Is there another kind of stitch you're wondering if they had? If you name, if you're asking about a stitch that isn't one of those stitches, let me know and I'll tell you if I've seen it. But I've basically seen the same thing. Patches, I saw this. I looked at this skirt from the 16th century that must have been a little girl's skirt. And it was so patched on the inside as to almost be nothing but patches on the lining. The shell was still in good shape, but the lining, you can tell that the lining is what took the brunt of the wear and tear, which makes sense because that's what's rubbing against your legs, right? And the patches were all done the way I do patches on my medieval European clothes. Basically, they cut out a rectangle of fabric, turned the edges under so that it would be nice and neat, put it on the fabric, and then stab stitched it in place with running stab stitches. So that there weren't stitches like back to back to back to back, but sort of loose stab stitches, enough to hold the patch on securely, but not so much that you're wasting extra time and thread, making it super duper secure. So that was really gratifying. Yeah. What's going on? What are you discussing? We're talking about medieval material culture. We're talking about historical fashion. I am sewing a sleeve for a new 15th century gown that will go over top of this one. And I'm answering people's questions about medieval history, medieval fashion, or anything else that comes up that's relevant to my base of knowledge. We've only just rediscovered Roman cement. Oh yeah, Villa Vendetta is so true. That was a really interesting rediscovery. Yeah, the cement that's actually sets in water, so cool. I am whip stitching. What I'm doing right now is I am actually whip stitching down the seam allowance on the inside of the sleeve so that it will actually lie nice and flatly when I put my arm in it, as I just demonstrated. Of course, I don't know how far behind. Let me see. Whip stitching down seam allowance is just so satisfying. Twitchy, it really is. I just love it. I love the look of a flat felled, of a felled seam. It's the little things. Let me see. Hazmat suit is definitely needed to travel back centuries. Yeah, 100%. Hold on a minute. Okay. Oh, Erin, thank you for joining us today. Welcome, my dear. That sleeve fits remarkable. Thank you. It's my own design, my own pattern. Yep. This brings us back to, that's why I don't like using commercial patterns, because they don't give the look that I want for what I see in the portraits and paintings. We can't make silk that's so thin it weighs a few grams because we've bred silk moths to produce silk strands thicker and thicker within about 100 years of the garments being made. The ability lost. Yeah, 100%. So actually, someone asked me if anyone has done any DNA testing on the silk from these grave finds here in Korea relative to the silk that's now available from the silkworms. And my colleague, Minji, who is a PhD in fashion history expert for Korean fashion, told me that some people have, and there's a paper on it. She's going to send me the paper. Yeah. While in Korea, have you encountered anybody who is largely able to recognize your clothing within a historical context? Yes, I've met people who recognize that I was medieval. That's about as close as they can get. I have not met anyone who looked at this and said 15th century French, Flemish, English. So yeah, I have met people who have identified it as medieval, but not as specifically what specific century and place. Stealth, welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. Are you from the Amish community? I am not. I am wearing a 15th century French, Flemish, English ensemble from more or less the second half of the 15th century. I'm currently in Korea, hence why you see this amazing timber frame structure here behind me, right? Gorgeous, isn't it? And yeah, so I am not Amish. You can tell I'm not Amish because all of this and my hair and the blue, the, all this fabric, no, nothing Amish about this. I am in Daegu, actually. Please post that paper to Discord. Yeah, Twitchy, once I get it, I will. You're going to have to use Google Translate or pay to have someone translate it, though, because it will be in Korean only. So that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem with a lot of the research that has been done on Korean historical textiles and fashion, is that it's all in Korean and Korean only. So, you know, they actually have, I wish Europe had the system they have. They've got a central database that has set a national database that has collected all of the research papers that have been done on historical Korean fashion, all of the excavation surveys from excavated garments, all in one place, well organized. I mean, I wish we had this for Europe or any country in Europe, right? So instead, you have to read like every single journal on historical fashion or history to find all these articles, but not in Korea. So yeah, the only problem, as I said, is that the majority of the articles are written only in Korean. So their reach is really, really small. But that's why Minji really is hoping, and I think I'm going to, that when I do my PhD work, I'm going to focus on Korean fashion so that I can start really getting this information out to the greater world. But also I'll be able to bring a lot of new research and new understanding to the table, because unlike anyone in Korea who has studied these garments, I actually make and wear these garments and understand how historical garments actually wear and how they wear out and what causes them to wear out. Whereas all the people looking at them, none of the people who do fashion history here actually make clothing. How tragic is that, right? It's all theoretical to them. It's all hypothetical. They don't actually remake the garments that they're studying. They don't wear the garments that they're studying, so they have no understanding of their own historical garments. You know, so I'm going to be able to bring a lot of new things to the table in doing my PhD research. I'm very excited by this prospect. Now, do I only wear historic clothing? Nope. No, I do not. I have a wardrobe with a lot of different. Okay, so you know how libraries have thematic sections? I have a wardrobe with thematic sections. I've got my daily wear by season, then I've got my cruise clothes, then I have my evening clothes, then I have my tea clothes, then I have my hanbok, my Korean clothes, my traditional Korean clothes. I've got my historic garments, then divided up by era. No, I just wear, for these live streams, for obvious reasons, for my medieval channel, I like to wear medieval clothes for my medieval sewing party so that you all have something pretty and interesting to look at, and I can bring more verisimilitude to the whole experience for you. Twitchy says, I can't understand that. How can you theorize if you have no understanding of what can actually be achieved with the materials available? Look, I don't know, Twitchy. It's really baffling to me. And yeah, it's mind-boggling. I don't understand it either. Yeah. So, I mean, some of them will wear like traditional hanbok, but they haven't worn the historical garments themselves or reproductions of them. And they haven't worn them on a regular basis. Like they don't do living history the way we do, the way I do, the way many of us do. Do I like Renaissance fairs? I have only been to one Renaissance fair, so I can't tell you. And the one I went to, I was working. And if I had been an attendee, I probably would not have liked it. I do living history, which is a different thing. So we have private events and we're not being paid. There's not performers there to entertain. We're actually in the time entertaining ourselves. So I can't speak for all Renaissance fairs because I've only been to the one. I've been to medieval markets in Germany, and those have gone really downhill, a lot sharply downhill in the last 20 years. They went from being more reenactor events to just these horrible commercial affairs that are where lots of merchants selling cheap made in China tchotchke and people wearing medieval market clothes instead of an authentic experience. So I prefer private events, I'll be honest. Yeah, ThinkFact is definitely asking amazing questions. Yeah, ThinkFact, thank you so much for joining. Please join my community if you haven't. Please subscribe. Do you speak Korean? I speak Korean at a 4-year-old level. I've been trying to get into an intensive Korean class for a while, but it's really hard where I am because I'm just here as a visitor these days, and I'm not allowed to register at the university for their immersive Korean class unless I have a certain kind of visa. And to get that kind of visa, I have to be in America for a long time to apply for it and get it. And I don't want to be in America for long enough to apply and get it. It's complicated, but I do speak at a 4-year-old level. Yeah. Contessa, how does your low on the floor sitting arrangement in Korea compare to 14th century norms in Western Europe? Was everyone on chairs in the West, or was that just for wealthy Contessas? As far as we can tell, everyone was on benches at least, because floors were cold, I suspect. Yeah, no, floor seating does not seem to be much of a thing in the West in Europe at all. So yeah, this is an Asian thing, not a European thing. Even when people go on picnics in the Middle Ages, if you look at depictions of the aristocrats picnicking, they will actually bring furniture, chairs and tables, so that they can set a table and chairs up in the forest and have a picnic, right? Even they aren't sitting sitting on the ground. Now, when we see peasants, like we see shepherds, for instance, out in the fields doing their thing, they might sometimes sit on the ground or they might sit on a log. But for the most part, Western Europe is definitely a chair culture, except, of course, for Al-Andalus, for the Iberian Peninsula, which is mostly Muslim for a great deal of the Middle Ages, and which therefore has a lot of traditions and practices that come from the Middle East, and they're also traditionally floor sitters, or they sit lotus style on a platform style seat, right? So. Yeah, but for the most part, Western Europe is a seat-sitting culture, not necessarily chairs, but benches at the very least. Yeah. Who wants to be in America at the moment? I don't. I don't. Please no, and I don't want to be trapped there because my passport is needed for review by an embassy. Amazing job learning Korean. I'm trying to learn Japanese, and I know it can be very difficult. So you should all know, for those who don't know, my first career was as a professional translator. I'm a professional linguist. My languages were not Asian languages, however, they were European languages, but languages kind of come easily to me. So I'm not boasting, it's just the truth, right? I don't have to put as much effort into foreign language learning as other people do. So I'm not really impressed with my meager Korean abilities. They should be better. But Japanese and Korean are very, very similar. It is very easy to learn Korean if you already know Japanese. It's easy to learn Japanese if you already know Korean. It's sort of like it's easy to learn French or German, actually, if you speak English, vice versa, right? Versus if you speak French, it's not easy to learn Korean. Yeah, racket roller, I don't want to be in America. Sorry. And I have left on purpose. I'm in Korea right now. If you love it, good for you, but the country is a dumpster fire right now and just getting worse by the day. So every day I look at the news and I go, what the? I literally call my family and I say, is this really happening? And they're like, oh yeah, that's true. I'm like, no, please tell me it's not. No, it's true. Yeah. Sorry, this is definitely not the Love America channel. This is the love of what America could be, but it's definitely not what it should be right now. Yep. And if, maybe this isn't the channel for you. Would your current garment be considered modest for a noble woman? No, not at all. In fact, this is pretty modest by 15th century standards in most places in Europe. Women are, there is nothing wrong with women showing a pleasant amount of décolletage, right? It's very common. Anyone who thinks otherwise needs to go and look at the portraits more closely. No, this would not be considered immodest. This is not the era of immodesty. By the end of the 15th century, there are places that are getting kind of weird, where they're starting to moralize, say, busts showing, and it depends on when and where you are, but specifically. So for 15th century France, no. Not immodest. No. Yeah. How do you keep your hands from getting wrecked hand sewing? Mine hurt so bad after a couple of hours. Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, maybe because I do it so often that my hands are just like any muscular exercise, my hands are just used to it. So, yeah, maybe. And are you talking about there's a difference between the muscles hurting and your skin hurting because you've poked lots of holes in it and your joints hurting? If it's your joints, I can suggest some nice anti-inflammatories or collagen-rich beverages, which can help reduce inflammation in joints. If it's, there's tons of little holes in your fingers, you just have to keep sewing often enough that your fingers eventually develop calluses. If it's the muscles, then if you do enough of it day after day after day after day, your muscles will eventually stop whining about it. But if it's your joints, that's harder. That's harder. Let me see. Language-wise, I'm actually enjoying translating the Nun catalog, as I'm calling it, because I recently got a bit more context for its contents, and it's amazing. I love documents like that. Twitchy are just astounding. What are some of your most interesting lessons learned from that Nun catalog? Since I know what you're talking about. Oh, Think Fact, welcome to my community. It's good to have you. Oh goodness. I'm so far behind. Great. Did I miss a question? Oh, good. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. Yep, I got that question. Okay. Lalit, welcome. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Think Fact. Yes. Yeah, I would definitely need more details about what the pain is. It's always joint pain. Oh, although I managed to accidentally jam a needle under my nail. Thanks for your answer. Yeah, so the joint pain, unfortunately, I'd have to actually see how you're sewing, because it could be the way you're holding things that might be causing issues with your joints, but otherwise unfortunately, it might just be a general inflammatory issue. In which case you could try icing your joints, depending on the kind, if there's swelling, especially. You could actually also try warming your finger joints up beforehand by actually putting them in some nice warm water so that they start off more supple and more warmed up. If it's not, if it's joints, that's harder. That's much harder. What type of needles do you use? Do you have any preferences? I prefer Japanese embroidery needles, honestly, because they're so fine. They're so fine, and they're very well made, and they're strong, and they last a long time. I do prefer the Japanese made needles, just in general. They're more expensive, but they're worth it. Yep. Let me see. Twitchy says secular canonesses that were patronized by the Pope, which were highly involved in Italian church politics and caused immense scandals with their dress. Secular canonesses. Now that's a fantastic idea. I love that idea. Let me see. From which age did I learn stitching? So my grandmother, my father's mother, grandmom taught me I think the first thing she taught me, I think it was 8. Yeah, I think it was 8 the first time when I started learning to sew. But unfortunately, she died not too long after that. And so then I didn't start sewing again until I was 14. And then I taught everything else I taught myself. My grandmother only taught me a couple of hand sewing stitches, but after that it was all me, all self-taught. So I've been sewing, I would say I've been sewing regularly since I was 14. When I got my first sewing machine and started just cutting fabric and sewing it together and seeing what would happen. Because when I started sewing, there was no internet, really, and even what there was a wasteland of chat rooms and porn. So there was no useful information on the web when I started this journey. So yeah, I'm mostly an autodidact. I'm mostly self-taught. Let me see. Twitchy says these institutions were so exclusive that it was invitation only, but they still survive in some degree as modern religious sisters. Yeah, it's interesting how certain various orders, whether secular or religious, started as something very practical and hands-on, and in many cases have now evolved or devolved into an organization that has nothing to do with its original purpose. I'm thinking of the merchant companies in London, for instance, that are definitely no longer the places where tailors, where tailors, the merchant tailors, for instance, are not tailors. They're fraternities instead. Okay, almost done here. Is anyone else working on anything at the moment? I've got so many projects. I definitely want to get started on applying my learnings from the 16th century Korean garments that I saw. The things I learned about 16th century Korean tailoring techniques just blew my mind. Like, they were doing bag lining in the 16th century before machines, right? Conventional wisdom says you don't start bag lining garments until you have machines to do all that extra in seam work. Nope, Koreans were doing sewing the skirt and sewing the lining completely separately, and then attaching them, even not pleating them together, but pleating the shell separately from the lining, and then attaching those at the waistband. Mind blown. Really amazing. I love bag lining. Let me see. I think everyone should learn to sew. I think everyone should learn to cook. I think everyone should learn to build a fire using flint and steel. I think we all need to get back to learning the basics of how to do a lot of these things for various reasons. I think, honestly, to be completely frank, I think we're at the cusp of a dark age, right? I think we're at the advent. We're at the inception of a dark age. Not the cusp. I wish we were at the cusp. No, we are at the inception of a dark age, and we're about to find out that technology has made us useless as a society in general in the West, and in the developed, not just the West, in developed parts of the world, because Korea is not the West, but most people here couldn't start a fire to save their lives. Right, so I think we're going to find out that our reliance on technology and our reliance on artificial intelligence is about to bite us in our ass so hard that we're going to bleed out. Yeah. Last question for you for the night. Do Koreans use a lot of English loanwords, names to describe European history? Terms like medieval or Byzantine, for example, or do they make their own words or loans from elsewhere? That is a really good question. So Southern Korean, so South Korean, has a lot of English loan words, not necessarily for history, but for daily objects like shampoo, for instance. They've got a lot of loan words that actually aren't used in English. Like they say 물 tissue, water tissue, which is their word for a wet wipe, for instance. But in terms of history, I haven't really heard, I'm thinking about this, I haven't heard. They usually actually have their own words surprisingly, because China did, right? So if historically China had a word to describe, say, Europe in the Middle Ages, and they did, then Korean uses that, right? There's a lot of Chinese loanwords in Korean, especially in academia, especially for referencing historical things. I've heard them say medieval, right? But there is a Korean word for it as well. But there are lots of English loanwords in Southern Korean and South Korean. In North Korean, on the other hand, they've intentionally avoided English loanwords and invented whole words out of, entire new phrases to describe things that are actually imported from the West, like shampoo, for instance, is a Western invention, rather than using the English loanword because they don't want to suffer under the yoke of the evil Western capitalist imperialists, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Let me see. I started a cathedral window panel recently, but I'm struggling to finish it. I agree that we need to learn how to sew again. There's so much rubbish clothing out there now. It really is. It's really bad. It really is bad. I had a lot of Einspanners in Seoul, a German word. Yeah. The Einspanner. Yeah, that's I loved. When I explained to my Korean friends what that means, I'm like, Entspannen means to relax. Einspannen means the opposite, and they're like, oh. And I said, yeah, it makes sense for a coffee-based beverage, right? Right. Okay. So this is the sleeve isn't done per se, but at the very least, Come on, it's such a big sleeve. I have to lean all the way back here, right? Right. So you can see how, trying to get it so the light actually reflects on it. Yeah. So you can see how I've felled open the seam. I ironed it flat basically, and I have whip stitched it down so that now when I turn it right side out, which we're about to do, big reveal, right? Because this is the inside, the part with the silk lining. By the way, I'll put the sleeve on and show you, and then I'll tell you something about Duchess Margaret had a gown like this with a sleeve like this, but it was so tight that she had to have laces. She actually has laces over the wrist area from like here to here, so that because it's so tight and so fitted that her hand wouldn't fit through it. Yeah. Well, isn't that sexy? Okay, let's put it on and show you. So you can see the benefits of flattening open that seam and sewing it down. Okay, yeah. See, so this will actually literally go over this more or less like this, because the dress, it will attach to a dress that goes over top of a kirtle like this, right? You can see how nicely that fits over top of my shoulder. You can see, I know it's kind of dark in here, so you can't necessarily see very well, but I'll try to come into the light here so you can see just how nicely fitted the sleeve is. And there is, yep. See, nice fitted curves and all the things. So yeah. Unfortunately, I accidentally put a seam in the middle when I was ironing it, but I'll fix that later. No problem. I hope no problem. Yep. So yeah. So now I have to, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to finish off the cuff by putting facing. Actually, I'm going to turn this flat like that, whip stitch it down, and then I'm going to install a facing around the edge. But then this is actually going to the cuff is actually going to get lined with a silk velvet, so that when I turn it back, it's got this beautiful lining, and then you see this beautiful silk velvet cuff, right? So that's what's going to be happening there. Let me see. Thank you for answering all my questions. I really appreciate it. Well, thank you, ThinkFac. I hope you've subscribed. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, and I look forward to having you in another stream. You've been asking fantastic questions. It's been really great having you. Sewing, so soothing and empowering when you realize that you are capable of producing whatever you want and aren't reliant on inaccurate size charts. Oh yeah. Yeah, my body does not fit modern sizes very well. Yeah. People always say, oh, everything you wear looks good on you. And I'm like, no. Everything I actually bother to purchase looks good on me, because I'm not going to buy something that doesn't look good on me. But you have to understand that for every 10 garments I try on, one of them actually fits me correctly. Because I don't have a size chart body, but most people don't have a size chart body, right? I definitely don't. I like that hand sewing. This piece means that you are focusing on just one piece at a time. Machine sewing is so fast that it's easy to lose yourself in the entire garment. Yeah. So I will admit I'm going to have to do the long seams for this dress on machine, because I just don't have time to do everything by hand, because I've fallen so far behind in my project work. From having to do more than just sewing in my life, that my garments, my historical garments, are wearing out. And I have a 2-week event in July, August, where I need to have enough garments to get me through the whole time, and I don't want to be wearing the same 2 dresses for the entire event. So to get new things done in time, I'm going to have to use the machine on the inside seams. But I'm still doing all of anything that's anything that's customer facing, right? Anything that will actually be visible on the outside, that's definitely being done by hand. Hence why all the finishes are being done by hand and that kind of thing. But yeah, I definitely do enjoy the slow work, the slow process of the hand sewing. It's also just so relaxing, and I can make a garment look so much better by hand sewing it than by machine. Is 100%. Yep. Okay, any questions, anyone? For those who are just finding my channel, I've got a whole catalog of not just live stream recordings, but finally carefully researched, carefully scripted, carefully edited videos on a wide array of topics of medieval material culture. So you might want to check that out when you get a chance. Some very interesting stuff. I have getting dressed videos, really carefully narrated, researched, documented getting dressed videos from two different 15th century ensembles, where you can see me getting dressed from the skin out and everything is explained very carefully. I've got one ambient getting dressed video that's just me and my damsel getting dressed in a beautiful bedchamber. Right, lots of options. Question: wondering which fibers were most traditional Korean material was made from, and what type of looms they used. Contessa. They had both a backstrap loom and a horizontal loom. I think they had the horizontal loom by the middle of the first millennium, because China had a horizontal loom and they basically imported it. And the most common fibers were hemp, cotton, interestingly, rami, which is nettle cloth, and silk. They did have like very few wool garments, but they didn't do wool here. Wool was not a thing they made in Korea, that was imported. And as far as I understand, it was probably felted. Very rarely do I ever see reference to woolen garments in Korean grave goods or inventories or the historical records. So most people were cotton. Cotton has been here for much longer than it's been in Europe as a fabric. Silk, hemp, rami, those are the main fibers. And silk was so here's how you know that a material or a concept or a substance or an object is very important to a society is when the language for that society has a lot of very specific terminology for it. So the Korean doesn't have one word for silk. I mean, it does now, silka. They actually just took silk and Koreanized it. But historically, Korean has like 20 different words at least for silk, because they actually, it's not just the fact that it's silk, but the kind of weave that it is all one word. So in English, we say silk damask, silk satin, silk velvet, right? Silk tabby weave. No. In Korean, that's all one word, right? So ju is not the same as muju is not the same, right? They've got all these different words that mean both the fiber and the type of weave all in one word. So that's how important silk was to Korean society. Oh, Nadir, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah, so is anyone working on any projects? Let me see. Felting is cool. Thank you. Great linguistic input. And of course, the China link. Yeah, I mean, so I tried it. When I moved here for the first time in 2014, one of the eye-opening, but in retrospect, obvious points to me that I learned when I started really studying the history in depth of Asia, because I was here, so I was going to understand where the hell I was living. That's how I do things. I realized that China is the Rome of Asia, right? So just like Rome was massively influential through Africa and Europe and the Middle East, China, linguistically, culturally, economically, and for centuries and centuries still impacting, right? China was that for Asia, for all of Asia, right? So the impact of China, the Chinese language, Chinese writing system, arts, fashion, religion, philosophical belief, court structure, government, it's all Chinese, right? There's China, not modern Chinese, obviously, ancient Chinese, but very impactful here. And so, because China was, especially in the Tang Dynasty, was very innovative, very advanced. That's when most of China's best inventions date to the Tang Dynasty. Korea got those too. You know, Korea was a client state, literally a client state, directly sort of semi-beholden to Tang, right? Okay, I'm gonna sneeze, I'm sorry, everyone. Or maybe not. Okay, I thought I was gonna sneeze, so I'm not gonna sneeze. Anyway, so what that means is that all of those advances Korea had also. Yeah, so, you know, they had printing here. Lots of printed books dating back over 1,000 years, right? The historical record here is crazy in depth. Let me see, China is linked to everything Asian. Yep, bonsai is Chinese, not Japanese, even though bonsai is commonly linked to mainly Japan, yeah, 100%. China is in everything here. It really is. I'm working on a set of new garb for myself and the two kiddos before the 17th, where we have a 9-day fair camp. I'm so excited. Oh, Erin, you're down in New Zealand, right? I'm sorry, if you don't want to answer that in the live stream, I apologize. You're at Canterbury Fair, right? That's a 9-day event? Oh, okay. You definitely need to see about bringing me down for that next year. My condo Tiero and I can bring you, can take it to a whole new level of fun, I feel like. Yeah, that sounds exciting. I'm excited for you. What kind of site is it? Yeah. New Zealand isn't far, baby. It's not far, not by my standards. I have strange standards of distances, so just take that into account. Yeah, there are so many Chinese words in Korean, and I can always tell which are the Chinese words because they're the short ones. Multi-syllable words are Korean. Single-syllable words are Sino-Korean, invariably. Oh, heat doesn't bother me, babe. Heat doesn't bother me. I grew up in Delaware in the United States. It's on the center of the East Coast, and our summers there are tropical. And I grew up without air conditioning, as some of you know, because my beloved Lord Master Papa is very frugal. Thankfully, he instilled in me an equal sense of frugality, but that also meant we didn't have air conditioning because that was expensive. But I'm actually okay with that because now I don't like air conditioning. I prefer to just be hot and humid rather than be in an artificially chilled airspace. So, yeah. Let me see. It's a very large scout camp, approximately 500 people. That sounds lovely. I'd love to bring the Contessa flair to that. So we need to chat for next year, I do believe. Jessica, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show. I'm just taking a little tea break. I've just finished sewing. Well, no, not finished sewing. I finished finishing the inside of this new sleeve for my new Burgundian gown. Isn't she sexy? And I wish I could convey to you how wonderful this wool feels. It is so silky. It is just so beautiful and silky. It does not feel like wool at all. It's gorgeous. This is gorgeous doe skin here. Not Canterbury, yeah, sorry. Sorry, Canterbury Fair in the Nova Zeeland, not the older Zeeland. Yeah, there's thanks to the shall we say promiscuity of the British Empire, there are many Canterburys, there are many Dovers, there are many Milfords, there are many Norfolks. All throughout the world. Rule Britannia. Yeah. Hey, look. Some of my earliest American ancestors came over on the Mayflower, so they were Brits. They were Puritan nutters, but they were Brits. So yeah, next steps on this, I'm going to turn it inside out again, is to finish off the cuff. And I have lined it in silk, so it's wool lined in silk. I'm kind of sort of regretting lining it in silk because if I hadn't lined it in silk, the wool has a natural stretch to it, a natural give that the silk has removed from it because it's cut on the grain, not against the grain. But this is how it's documented in the expense accounts of, thank you, Jessica. Oh, really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I got a 2026 gift. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Anyway, the expense accounts of Margaret of Denmark, Queen of Scotland, Queen Consort of James III of Scotland. We have her expense accounts from the 1470s, and they are fan-frickin-tastic. Some of my favorite things to read are her expense accounts. Yes, I'm weird, but stay with me here. One of the things it says is that her gowns, it quotes like the various components for her gowns, and many of her gowns, they quote the fabric for the shell, and then it says in a separate entry right below that, plus silk to line the sleeves and the gown. But then you look at the amount of silk that they're talking about and you realize it's not enough silk to line the whole gown. So my suspicion is it's enough silk to line it to about the hips and to line the sleeves. because in the extant gamora, which is kind of the Italian equivalent of this garment, the kirtle, in Beata Osana's, Osana Andrease's gamora, dating to the 1460s, it also is only lined to about the hips, right? It's lined in the bodice, it's lined in the sleeves, the skirts are lined only to the hips. So that makes sense that for Queen Margaret's gowns, that they would also only be lined to the body, to the part way down, because in the silk, because when it gets cold, her gowns are then a full fur lining is installed from neck to hem, right? But that's a fur lining that can be removed in the summer when it gets warm again. So that means that you don't need a full silk lining, because for warmth you're going to add the fur. You don't need the silk for warmth. So that's why I went ahead and lined the sleeve of this to follow the example in Queen Margaret's expense accounts. I may wish I had just let it be, and if I get really annoyed by the lack of a stretch from the silk, I can always just go in and cut out the silk lining. That's fine. Yeah, so we'll see if I come to regret that choice or not. But for now, the reason you might want to line a sleeve or the bodice of a gown is because the sleeves take a lot of wear. I can show you the insides. I don't have it here, but I should show you the insides, the lining of the sleeves of the other gowns that I made in this style. The lining is disintegrated. It's gone. It's just not there anymore. The fibers have literally ascended to another plane of existence. They're gone, right? And the same thing on the inside. The lining of the bodice is where all the wear and tear happens. So that lining is taking the damage rather than the shell fabric. So the lining can be easily replaced when the pretty shell fabric is preserved. But if you don't have the lining, then the shell fabric wears down. And then you're talking about patches, and that can get more tricky and unsightly. Whereas replacing the lining, no problem. And we actually have expense accounts that talk about replacing the lining of garments. Right. So practical experience from wearing these historical garments for weeks and weeks at a time and wearing them hard, expense account evidence, and sometimes even when we have it, we can actually see the wear and tear in the garments that have survived. So yeah. Let me see. We said sorry and gave the toys back, Villa Vendetta. It's okay. Look, man, like I said, I come from an imperialist country too, so it's not a judgment. No judgment here. This is a judgment-free zone. We all come from dodgy backgrounds, okay? I don't know. Maybe the Kiwis. I know we all come from dodgy backgrounds. Just, just saying. That's why there's lots of Dovers everywhere. Yep. No judgment, judgment-free zone. None of us, as a wise Jew once said, "Let he who has not sinned cast the first stone." How many fabric garments survived from the Middle Ages? Josh, so it's shocking how many have actually survived. And the thing is that we're finding more and more, like almost on a daily basis, new medieval garments are being found, by which I mean medieval garments are being newly found, because we're finding them in places we never looked before. So what happens is, here's what's been happening. We're finding graveyards where the soil conditions have resulted in garments being preserved. Church crypts are being opened because the church is damaged by earthquakes or flooding or fires, and so they have to do restoration work, and so they do archaeological excavations to preserve this restoration work can be invasive, and so we're finding extant garments in tombs, in crypts. We're finding them in the walls of medieval buildings that are being restored. We're finding them shoved in strange boxes in strange corners of castles that have been forgotten. So actually more and more garments are being found. So there are thousands, believe it or not, there are thousands of garments that have survived from the Middle Ages. Now, what do we mean by garment? Do I mean that a garment that looks like this, all beautiful blue and perfectly preserved, we've thousands of those? No, definitely not. But if you talk about pieces that are large enough to identify as a piece of the garment and be useful for recreating garments, then yeah, there are actually across across Europe and including Greenland, by the way, there are thousands of garments that have survived, many more than you would expect. Again, I'm not talking about like whole dresses because not many of those have survived, but we do have cases of like entire bodices surviving or skirts surviving or, dresses down to like the thigh or knee. And in Greenland, we have a lot of garments that survived because of the permafrost. So more than you would imagine, enough to get a really good idea about many garments and more garments than you would imagine. Plus 1,000 years of history, the Middle Ages is 1,000 years. It's a long time. So yeah, we actually have way more than you people expect, and we're discovering more and more every day, literally every day. Let me see. So not patching like the little girl's costume, but complete replacement. Yes. Okay, I see what you're saying. So sometimes, sometimes depends on your socioeconomic status, right? So it would depend on also how worn out the lining is. So we're talking about replacing the lining, right? So if the lining gets so worn out that it can't be patched anymore, then it's replaced. But if it can still be patched, if there's enough structural integrity left to actually hold the patch on, then they would patch it. I've done this myself. There are points at which you just have to admit that the fabric can't take it anymore, and then you would replace the whole lining. But especially in royal garments, on the linings, they're probably more likely to just replace the whole lining. Now that fabric would not get thrown away. The fabric that gets cut out and replaced will be upcycled into something else or recycled into something else, right? It will not just get thrown away. But it depends on your socioeconomic status too, right? Yeah. Let me see. What did medieval people think about rabies and other scary diseases? Well, they knew they were diseases. So you're probably asking if they thought that you were possessed by a demon. We don't really have much evidence of that. They thought they were diseases. They knew they were diseases. They knew it was an infection. They knew it needed to be treated. Unfortunately, the medieval medical theory was humoral, which means the four humors were very informative. So treatments may or may not have actually been effective. Because they might have been treating it as an imbalance of the humors rather than as an infectious disease as such, although contagion was certainly an idea, especially the Black Death definitely gave them an idea about contagion. But yeah, so they thought they were diseases, but the general medical theory was that it was an imbalance in your humors, right? Your humors are black bile, yellow bile, black bile, yellow bile, blood, and where'd the other one go? Damn it. But then there's also your temperaments, right? So you've got tempers also. So, melancholy, color. I can't believe I've just forgotten all my medical theory. But yeah, they thought it was an imbalance in your humors. Black bile, yellow bile, blood, gall. Gall, that's bile. What is the fourth humor? Phlegm, thank you, phlegm, yes. Those are your four humors, and then you've got your four temperaments, right? So it was an imbalance in your humors, it was an imbalance in your temperaments. That's what distempered means. It means you're out of balance in your humors and your tempers. So yeah, that's where temperament comes from. So yeah, it was viewed as an imbalance, and a balance that needed to be restored, which is unfortunately why phlebotomy was a thing, why bloodletting was a practice, because certain conditions were understood to be an excess of blood. Right? So then they poke a hole in you and you bleed out, and that's supposed to restore your balance. There are actually some diseases where bleeding will actually help, believe it or not, but not many. Mostly it just made them weaker and they died. So a disease impacted all strata of society. It is less likely to be seen as a reflection of morals. Diseases, although the Black Death was viewed as a judgment on humanity, right? So keep that in mind. The Black Death was absolutely viewed as a judgment on humanity. It was viewed as a referendum, a divine referendum on humanity, and humanity had failed. So definitely not a question of necessarily individual moral failing, but of global moral failing. How's his life? Welcome. I wondered if you were going to join us today. Good to see you again. I saw you found me on Facebook. I accepted your friendship request. Let me see, Urban Squatch. Thank you for answering my question. Stay awesome and keep up with the awesome knowledge and content. Well, thank you, Urban Squatch. Really appreciate that. Or Urban Squatch. Urban Squatch. Sorry, I put the break there incorrectly. Let me see. Yeah, thank you for joining. Don't forget to like and subscribe, everyone, if you're enjoying. This is something I try to do on a daily basis. I've kind of fallen out of the daily rhythm this last week because other things were happening in my day that prevented me from having a good period to be able to sit down and do this, but I'm glad we got together today. Tomorrow is Friday. I think I'm going to be doing a medieval story time tomorrow morning-ish my time, which is going to be like 13 or 14 hours from now, your time. So we're going to be looking at rules for how ladies should comport themselves in the court, how they should behave themselves according to one of the medieval feminists par excellence, Christine de Pizan. You're going to find some very sadly familiar advice that she gives that hasn't changed to this day. And it's very interesting stuff. And I'm going to be reading, I actually brought with me, so I could read on my own if I didn't manage to get the live stream going, but we did get the live stream going. But I'm also going to be reading more pardon letters from the Duke of Burgundy, this great book, Honor, Vengeance, and Social Trouble, which is about pardons from the Duke of Burgundy to a wide array of members of Burgundian society. And so we're going to be reading some of the letters of pardon. I'm going to try to find ones that aren't too disturbing, but some of them are pretty disturbing. But these letters of pardon are a fascinating look into actual daily life and social interactions in places where we normally don't find history recorded. Taverns, street corners, back alleys, private chambers, right? Hostels. So we're going to actually get a look into aspects of medieval daily life that most sources do not grant us visual access. But you're going to get some real visuals, and you're actually going to see how people interacted based on the kinds of things for which they're trying to be pardoned. Because these pardon letters entail a detailed description of the events as they transpired, the statements based on eyewitness accounts. So it's not just you're pardoned for doing this. No. The letters are very detailed. The letters go into the detail about everything that happened for which the individual is being pardoned. And I've learned so much reading this book, extra dimensions about medieval life. For instance, in the 15th century, Burgundy, the Dukes of Burgundy were very clever. They consolidated their political power, their soft power, by taking the right of pardon from the local courts and saying the only person who has the right to pardon a criminal is I, the prince, capital P, which meant that that's a consolidation of power to the top, right? The French royal court did the same thing. So in the 15th century, in the 14th century, people could be pardoned at the local magistrate level, basically, or the local sheriff or bailiff level. But the Dukes of Burgundy said, only I, the prince, can grant a pardon. And the other interesting thing is this book talks about administrative fees. Like we think about minutia like administrative fees and tax returns as being a modern concept. It is not. They have administration fees in the Middle Ages as well. So if you wanted to apply for a pardon, you had to pay an administrative fee to process that pardon. But the fee was predicated based on your income and your economic, your asset situation, and very often, especially for the lower half of the socioeconomic stratum, of the socioeconomic spectrum, the dukes they outright forgave the fees. They said, no, this person does not owe us any administrative fees. They can't afford to pay it. But if you're a rich merchant asking for a pardon, your fees are pretty high. So this has been such a fascinating look into daily life in the 15th century, and it's really expanded my horizon. So we're going to be reading at least one pardon letter tomorrow my time, later on today for many of you, in about 13 hours, as I said, 14 hours. I think time is it? So I guess 13 hours from now, probably 13 or 14 hours from now. Really fascinating stuff. Can't wait to share this with you. Story time, can you tell mystical, magical story of medieval times? Yes, I can also read to you. We can also read one of the stories, one of the fantastic medieval fantasy stories from Marie de France, one of her Breton lays. We'll definitely do that as well. Let me see. Do you have a favorite medieval story or historical figure, Countess? Oh, favorite medieval story. Gosh, that's kind of hard. You know, maybe not a medieval story. I really love Chrétien de Troyes' Conte du Graal, the story of the Grail, but the version written by Chrétien de Troyes in French because it's such a mystical story. It is so beautifully written. It doesn't even have a proper ending. um, because it's incomplete, but it's still, the parts that are written are so beautiful and so enthralling, especially the scenes with the Fisher King, where you have the bleeding lance that pierced Jesus's chest and the Grail, and you've got this idiot Percival who just doesn't know what to do with himself in the presence of this entire mystical, magical scene. So yeah, I love Chrétien de Troyes' Conte du Graal. That's kind of what springs to mind immediately. But you know, there's a lot of these fantasy stories that are in Chaucer or in Boccaccio's Decameron that are also really interesting. Yeah. Let me see. Those dukes knew which side their bread was buttered on. Yes, they did. Yes, can you post the book name you just recalled? I have no idea how to write it. I cannot right here, but I promise, as always, I will post a picture with the ISBNs as a community post after Medieval Storytime, so that you all can, if you wish to, you can acquire the books. From Interlibrary Loan is a very good way to get them, depending on your country. I also often can find these on Abe Books. This one is from Cornell University Press, Honor, Vengeance, and Social Trouble, so you can get that from Cornell University's page. I'm sorry, I don't know how to mirror this camera for you all, and it's backwards. Okay, hold it like that. Honor, Vengeance, and Social Trouble. Like freaking Leonardo da Vinci here writing backwards. Yeah. Okay. So medieval story time shall be forthcoming, everyone, I promise. Let's see, then on the weekend, I will be doing on my travels. If you're interested in following my travels and seeing, because for me, travel and history and culture very often intersect, but some of that content does better on my travel channel than on my medieval stuff channel. So if you're interested in traveling around the world and seeing my adventures in various places and my take on them, and I also do flight vlogging and hotel vlogging, but you can check out my travels with the Creative Contessa channel. I will be doing if you like cooking and watching people cook recipes from around the world, I will be doing this weekend a travel cooking from Thailand. I'm going to be making tom kha kai, tom kai ka, so tom kai soup. So that's the wonderful, yummy coconut milk-based soup with galangal and lemongrass and chicken and other yummy things in it. So I'll be making that this weekend. And on our medieval cooking with the Contessa this weekend, I still have to schedule it. I was going to do it on Saturday, but I might have to do it Saturday afternoon, more like this time, actually, because in the morning I've got a museum visit. So I will be doing vegetarian pies, so meat or egg and cheese pies, vegetarian style / vegan, or not vegan because it's cheese, egg and cheese pies, vegetarian pies, medieval pies. So we will be looking through original recipes and recreating pies from those original medieval recipes. I do offer classes. I haven't offered any classes in a while because my schedule's been so crazy, but yeah, for those who don't know, I teach lots of things. I offer workshops. I can be hired to come to you and teach. I can also, I can be engaged to do a private online class for you or to do a class for your group, thecreativecontessa.com. I haven't scheduled any classes in a while because life's been crazy, but yeah. Do I know how to fry chicken? I do know how to fry chicken. Of course I know how to fry chicken. I'm American, buddy. Come on, man. Ask me something hard. Thanan Banu. Maybe you've seen me on my travels channel? Maybe? Perhaps? Welcome to my live stream. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, people actually do hire me to go around the world, travel around the world and teach a variety of skills and crafts, cooking, crafting, dance, yeah, lots of things. Let's do a curdle workshop. I want to make a curdle with the same chaotic energy as the kerchief. Yeah, I've been thinking about how to structure the curdle workshop because, it's going to be distant. And now that I've got to leave Korea again and go travel because we still haven't managed to get residency here because of the job situation. So that kind of makes it challenging. I'll look into scheduling the curdle workshop though, Twitchy. I promise. Maybe I'll just go ahead and schedule it for like March or something. And I've got to think about how to do it. I think it's probably going to be 6 to 8 sessions ish. Maybe we'll see. Thank you, Thanan. I appreciate that. Thanana, I appreciate that. Well, I've got a lot of jobs these days because unfortunately the machines ate my career as a professional translator, as some of you know. Translation is a dead field, a dead career field. And then my second profession, which was editing, that's a dead career field also. So I've been left to try to make a living from the other mad skills I have, which are these historical handcrafts and possibly from travel. We'll see. Yeah, Twitchy, I've thought about that too, starting from the skin out, doing a full series, like starting with the underlayers and then moving out. I have considered that as well. And again, I have to think about how that would be structured. But yeah, I have been thinking about that as well. Hey, everyone, if you're enjoying, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I want to remind you all, you have to check your notification bell if you actually want to be notified when I publish things or go live. You have to click the notification bell and make sure that all is checked. And also YouTube resets your settings regularly. So if you care to be notified, you need to double check. Yeah, it sucks, but there it is. I am currently in Daegu, South Korea. It's one of my favorite places in the world. Yeah. Yeah, chemise is the next clear option for a tutorial, it really is. Hey, Twitchy, I really love hanging out with you too. And we definitely need to make our Compostela Pellegrino pilgrimage plans. Okay. Well, everyone, it is getting time for me to head home and get some dinner. Are there any final questions or comments? So coming up in about 13 or 14 hours will be medieval story time. And we're gonna probably touch on 3 different texts. We're going to touch on pardon letters. We're going to touch on rules for ladies and how they should conduct themselves. And we're going to have another reading from one of the original fantasy authors, Marie de France, right? 12th century fantasy author. Yeah, so are there any final questions? Otherwise, while I give you a chance to get your final questions or comments out there, I would like to thank my channel members and my patrons. Aaron was out there, Twitchy was out there. And I would like to say and also my super chatters and my gifters, I really appreciate you all supporting me financially, making it more possible for me to do this on this regular basis. I'd like to thank the rest of you for being part of my community and asking these fantastic questions, and for just being part of this growth journey of sharing history in a more tangible, more exciting way. Yeah. Question. Do you ever think of coming to India? I've been to India, and I do plan on definitely going back. I specifically definitely want to get out into not Delhi, right? I want to get away from the urban centers, because the urban centers in general make me a little crazy. I like the calm and beauty of nature and small villages. So India is absolutely on my list. Yeah, so is Tajikistan actually. Let me see. Can you make a vlog or live traveling from home to work? Well, work, yes. If you mean from home to this office, then yes, but otherwise I work at home a lot. But yeah, I can absolutely do a live stream. We can do a live stream walk from my home to here, for instance, and I'll narrate the whole way and explain everything you're seeing, 100%. But that'll be on Travels with the Creative Contessa, not here. Just wandering Korea. Yeah, I do lives all the time. So if you want to see me wandering around Korea, I do a lot of live streams wandering around Korea. That's on my Travels with the Creative Contessa channel. So make sure you subscribe there if you want to watch my general travels rather than my more historical content. The hell. Okay, who is my God? Well, I'm not certain if I believe in God or not, so that's a complicated question. Okay, everyone. If you asked a question, thank you for joining me, Oz, really appreciate that. If you had a question and I didn't answer it, I wasn't ignoring it on purpose. The live chat moved really quickly in some cases, or if you're watching this as a recording, please pop the question in the comments and I will see it and I will respond appropriately, I promise. Otherwise, until next time, everyone, hopefully in 14 hours-ish, May your adventures be creative and your learning completely unplanned, like mine pretty much always is. One big adventure of learning. Until next time, everyone, stay creative.